Well, welcome folks, Future Work Scotland. Thank you for joining us. Fantastic to be here for our June event. I'm Sathpal Singh, your host for this session. I'm joined by Martin Hinshelwood, who's going to be my co-host this evening. Donald's on, but he's actually driving at the moment. Some personal stuff on, but he is lurking in the background. But yeah, good to have Martin here. Martin's a friend. He's also one of our host collaborators, and he's also our sponsor. So fantastic to have his support this evening, because I can't do this on my own. So just the usual formalities. We do have a code of conduct. We simply ask that you're respectful of one another, and everyone have a great evening. That's basically all we ask. We'll do some formalities and shout outs at the end. Usual terms of questions. Drop your questions in the chat. Do prefix them with a Q so it's easy for Martin and I to spot them. I'm going to hand over to our wonderful speaker shortly, and we might take some pauses along the way, take some questions if they come up, but do pop them in the chat, and later we'll see how we go when we get closer to the end of Andrew's session. And with that, I'm delighted to welcome Andrew Pope to Future Work Scotland. He's joining us from the future. I do love the opportunity to say that. He's currently in Australia. He wasn't when we, as he mentioned, when we were starting to, collaborate on a session together. But he has relocated there. He's the co-owner, co-founder of a consultancy, designing collaborations. He does lots of amazing stuff across the world, Europe, US. A lot of his stuff is really in helping teams to collaborate well, creating great working environments, ways of working, all this good stuff that you'll read about in his bio and meetup. He's co-authored a bunch of books that support his work in his agency with Andrew Webb. And I'm delighted he's joining us this evening to be sharing a case study that, around some work he's been involved in the UK government agencies, around helping them with their hybrid working. And I think that's hugely important because it's still very topical, and I cannot believe the number of conversations I'm still in around how to make this stuff work. So I'm sure we'll all learn lots of good stuff from Andrew this evening. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Andrew. Andrew, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Seth. Thanks very much. Yes, excuse me. I had my coffee, so I'm ready to go. It's just gone 6 o'clock here, so it's still dark, and you'll be pleased to know it's cold. So if you're enjoying some summer heat, it's definitely not here. Which is good. I kind of quite enjoy the call. And as Seth mentioned, I relocated recently. I really am testing out the sort of the future of work and asynchronous ways of work, because I'm still at the moment working for European clients, and generally that is all being done asynchronously. So it's possible. We don't always have to be live in Teams meetings or Zoom meetings, but I'll talk a little bit more about that, and I will start sharing my screen. But I think, Saf, you were saying you're happy to take some questions as we go, like through the chats. Is that the best way? Cool. Okay.
Let's kick off, and we'll see how we go. Yeah. Take questions if you're happy to.
Yeah. All good. So I will. I'll focus this on a particular case study, because I can talk on about hybrid ways of work, but I think it's a lot easier to actually bring it up around a particular scenario, and more importantly, why we did it. I think that's the important thing. If we don't really know why, it's quite hard to sort of understand what these things mean, what's the impact of these ways of work. And I'll get onto the case study in a second. I will just sort of talk a wee bit about what I've done and how I got to where I am. So along with Alistair Webb, who's in Australia too, we wrote a book, Designing Collaboration, a few years ago, which is nothing to do with technology. It's just around behaviors, how we work in the digital workplace, but really around what are the habits, what are the actions as people that make good collaborative teams. And when the pandemic came along, this actually became quite a handy resource to sort of try and focus the activity on really the human behaviors, because I think, that what happened is we all plunged into the tools, and we all sort of were swimming around in this very digital landscape, and we sort of forgot about the people side in many cases. And from the book, this evolved into some cards, some playing cards. And these really came about as workshop resources. Suddenly I had to adapt very quickly to do remote workshops I used Mural and Miro. And so I needed content. And so I created all these nice sort of virtual cards that people could use in these workshops, which Sath is now kind of displaying. And yeah, and now they've been converted into a physical format. So yeah, now that we are actually getting back in the room, we can actually get people to sit together and actually hold something and interact over things rather than just sort of sitting staring at the screen, which is nice. But actually, as I was talking to Martin earlier, the virtual format has been really good. It's been a lot more inclusive. It's been easier to get more voices heard during the session. I've been quite surprised at the quality of the outputs compared to, say, a live workshop where you still might get one group of people dominating. The work that I've done recently, so we'll talk about this government case study. I've done some work with the private sector as well. I've got some ongoing work with a Dutch organization around just general digital skills coaching and agile coaching, where we're looking a lot at how to combine the bottom up and the top down of just new ways of work. So I'm generally working around Teams, Microsoft Teams, and how to get the most out of that, and really finding not the technology solutions, but what are the hacks that we can use to solve common problems around how we work, like with too many meetings and just too many emails, and how we can move to better ways of work to counteract those. But what I will say before I kick off into the case study is, really for me, it's all about habits. It's not about the tools, it's about the habits. So maybe I'll ask you a question, and if you want to answer in the chat, or using Mime if you've got your video on, what do you think is our dominant digital habit? So what do you think is the thing that we mostly do in Microsoft 365, if you use Microsoft 365? If you don't, it's still the same. In your tools, what do you think is the thing we do the most? So I'll give everyone a second to have a think about that. And I'm assuming, Saf, you can see the chat and you can.
You're Martin saying live calls.
Live calls. Anybody else got any guesses?
Feel free to drop your suggestions in the chat, folks. Chats. Yeah. Sending and receiving emails. Chat. Nothing more coming through just now.
Okay.
Avoiding notifications. I like that. Thanks, Maru.
Yeah.
Teams meetings. Yeah. Browse.
No one's put Wordle down yet, but
no, not yet. John says, defending my keyboard from my cat.
That must be quite a vicious cat. A Wordle plugin. Now, I'm surprised Microsoft haven't done that. They're trying to get everybody doing everything in Teams. So, you know, it's only a matter of time. Watching videos, avoiding phone calls from my boss. So, I mean, a lot of it is around, I think a lot of you are talking about calls. I mean, what surprised me, and you'll see, here are the actual results. It's reading email by a long way. And this has come from a recent benchmarking report. This is done by an organization called Swoop Analytics. And they analyze what we do in the tools, not necessarily what the tools are doing. So they look at what are our habits during the working day. And you can see that we spend most of our time in, this is Microsoft 365, reading email, a lot of reading email, which is, it says it all really. You know, we talk about the future of work and future ways of work, but really, you know, we're still working in the same ways that we have done for the last like 20 years. The next is audio, which is effectively Teams meetings. Then it's sending emails, and then the SharePoint rundown, OneDrive ones are really working on content, doing documents. And right down at the end there is channels, Teams channels. I mean, even chat doesn't come up hugely highly, which is quite a surprise. And really the gist of what I'm trying to do, I mean, it's to shift, it's to move these habits, to nudge people away from emails into channels, because this is where I think a lot of the power lies. This is where we can make work simpler, more efficient. We can actually reduce notifications. We can actually shorten our day, and we'll talk about how that happens. But more importantly, we can actually make work easier for ourselves. But it's really, these are the habits that I'm helping to shift, as well as meetings as well, moving a lot of the Teams meetings into asynchronous formats. Channels are great for asynchronous meetings. That is running them not live, running them as like a threaded conversation when we can. And that's key. This is what some organizations are doing, and they're doing it well, and they're getting some really, really great stuff coming out of it. A lot of people aren't. And I think it's because it's hard, it's hard to shift our behaviors. And yeah, there are some quite impressive ROIs. This has come again from the same benchmarking report, that if we actually are moving 20% of our emails to Teams or Yammer, we can save 20% meetings per day. And that's a minimum. That's like the sort of the bare minimum. So that's, instead of sending an internal email, we might post it as a message in Teams. And writing 4 Teams channel messages instead of attending a live meeting can save us at least 50% of that meeting time. So if we want to run something asynchronously, like it could be the equivalent of, say, a daily stand-up, we're just talking about what we're doing, what are our blockers, what are the things, who are we talking to, we can post that into a channel message. We could have a channel set up for that particular meeting, and that will save us half the time of the meeting. So there's a lot of time that we do spend emailing and in meetings that can be saved. But then this is nice for, like, senior level, the people that are looking at the figures. But really, when it comes to changing habits, that doesn't mean anything. These sort of figures, who cares? I get a lot of the so what, and I do a lot of work around workshops. Generally, I try and work with pilots and real teams and stakeholders that are going to be doing this stuff, like trying out new ways of work, and we get the same sort of reactions. People don't want to learn another tool or another way of work. There's a lack of feeling of safety. We're not sure about using channels, because that means we're working out loud. We're putting what we're doing out into a sort of a semi-public space. Some people like email. Some people feel very comfortable. I can do my job. Email's fine. It's worked for the last 20 years. It'll carry on working for me. We all use it. We all know how it works. And then lastly, what's in it for me? Why should I change? And look, these are all valid. We can do work. And I think, during the pandemic, we saw that we could actually carry on working, fairly normally, albeit, in sort of uncertain ways. We could carry on. And these are the sort of things that, when trying to find hybrid ways of work, we need to overcome, because otherwise it's yet another thing that we try and say, right, this is what we're going to be doing. This is our new strategy. This is our new transformation program. And a few people kind of get it, and then a lot of people don't, and nothing really changes. So I'll jump into the case study. And what we did here was, rather than thinking about the tools, so this government agency, like pretty much all of them, Microsoft 365 users, everyone was jumping into Teams very quickly during the pandemic, video calls and chat. It's typically the way people were working, but it was a very tool-centric way of working. So really the question that we were looking at was, what is the problem that better digital working will fix? Because we've been looking at really continuing, and that's fine. Continuing is good. The initial start of the pandemic was about just making sure that we could carry on working, we could carry on delivering, that productivity could be maintained, and also that obviously we stayed safe and weren't exposed to unnecessary risk. But moving forward, we need to look higher. We need to actually aim for improving things. So this is the question, and this framed the majority of the program. How we did it, I alluded to using Mural. So we created some lovely, nice, pretty workshops. This is all facilitated initially by me. So, it's broken down into sections. This is where the cards all were located. We had various different teams. I typically did no more than 15 people in a workshop because, as you probably appreciate, trying to generate a conversation in larger groups is impossible. And this is what it was really all about. It's about starting with the conversations, trying to figure out what's crap, what are the issues, what are the habits, what are the cultural issues that have really stuck around for so long that we actually need to focus on, because we've all, I think, struggled a bit, even down to a very simple level. We try to do maybe a simple change in the office, and there's always a few people that they don't want to move desk. They like their desk becomes home. It's there. They've got their pictures up, and it's like, for some of us, it's like, well, it's just a desk. It really doesn't matter. And for some people it does. And, we need to uncover these things. And so this is the route that we took. So the end point was to really uncover some new actions and techniques, because the reality is we need things to do. Like, there's no point just having a strategy where it's vague. We actually wanted some specific actions that we can apply. This is what it looks like in the tools, but we didn't want to start with the tools. So I mentioned, like, what's the problem we're working on? So we started out with goals, trying to find goals and understanding what's important. And this is all framed not in a what's wrong, but what's important. So using some questions around issues that during pilot workshops, I'd ask the groups what they would find important. So here's a couple of examples around diversity, around customer experience. There are around 24 of these cards that we used. We'd understand what's going to stop us. What are the blockers? What are the things that will hold this up? So say we've identified some goals. What's going to stop us individually get there? And we look at it through different lenses: technology, habits, culture, and process. And then we start using the cards. We get people to play around, generally get people to move into breakouts, into smaller groups, and just get them to look at some ideas. What would you like to try? So some of them are strategies, some of them are practices. And it's really as simple as just saying, this is the problem, these are the barriers. Here are some ideas. Talk about them and decide which ones you would choose, maybe 3 or 4 per breakout, and then bring these back into the broader session and explain how you would use these. And that's the key, because you're starting to get people talking about how they personally would use these new techniques in the tool set. And it's not me telling people what to do, because I don't know. I don't know the organization. I don't know what happens. I don't know sort of all the nuances that complex workforces have. I've seen what some do, and I've got a good understanding of what good can look like, but there's so many different ways of doing it. There's so many different things we can do, whether it's working in meetings, whether it's leadership habits. I want other people to surface what they would like to try. So this is how the approach worked. And then from there, we get a good sense of this is what the organization is ready for. It's not like trying to do everything. It's what's their level of readiness, what's their maturity, and then we can actually start to come up with some more appropriate actions. So we ran around 8 workshops. We surfaced 3 problems, 3 issues, and we identified around 20 new working practices. So we started with some stakeholder workshops where we surfaced issues and strategies, pilot team workshops where we looked at these issues, and then we asked, how would you like to tackle these using the content I showed you? And from then, that allowed us to actually develop some coaching for team leaders based on the findings. So effectively, your team said they wanted to do this. This is how you can enable this. This is how you can empower this. Because at the end of the day, the team leaders are the people that will be the enablers, but also the biggest blockers. if they're not willing to adapt, then yeah, this isn't going to happen. And the best thing was, is my client there was awesome. She was just incredibly focused, and she knew what this meant. And the comment she came out with at the end is like, you're a middle manager, you need to be a digital leader. If you can't adapt and use the technology better and in these ways, you shouldn't be a manager. You know, it's not just about leading in traditional ways where it's approving leave, it's assigning tasks. It's actually about leading people in the tools and helping them engage in the tools. And if you're not able to do that, then you'll have to find, you know, a different function rather than being a team leader. And it was, yeah, it was a powerful statement, but she's absolutely right. You know, it's we need to be digital leaders to actually empower our workforce to actually know how to communicate, which tools to communicate in, how to interact, and be there and listen in these tools. So this was a big part of it. And then the last piece was that the team in this government agency, I left them with all the resources, the cards, the whiteboards, so then they could carry on coaching teams individually themselves. So I wasn't, yeah, they weren't dependent on me carrying on to sort of keep the change management going. They're able to do this and then to carry on doing any continuous improvement based on, yeah, a year's time. Let's do it again. Let's see what's changed. So that was the approach. So I mentioned the problems, the issues that we identified. So how do you actually connect these with better skills? And it really is as simple as asking the team what they want to do. Yeah, it's trying to find out what do they feel are the practices, strategies they would like to do. So the starting point, the question was framed around what's important and which we don't do well. And we also asked, what do we do well? Because it was also very important to find the things that people felt proud of. What sort of things as an organization do we think we do very well? And there were quite a few of these, but to improve, we identified a few issues. Here are a couple, and these are from 24 possible gold cards we used in workshops. The first one that came up pretty much in every single workshop, and this is quite nice. I'm glad this one came up, because the question, do team members willingly adopt and use new technology to increase productivity and collaboration, or do we fall back on old habits? Really acknowledges that we want to do something. We want to embrace the technology. We want to be more productive, but we find it hard. We're creatures of habits, and it's acknowledging that these habits are hard to shift. So whatever we do in this program, we need to understand that we need to help people nudge habits. You know, it's not just about showcasing the technology and telling stories. Telling stories are powerful, but what are the simple nudges that can change habits? And the second one was, do we find ways to bring the voices of stakeholders and customers into team discussions? And I wonder, perhaps, did everybody else here find the same, that during the pandemic, when we were largely working from home, and to that extent, a lot of us are still working from home, that the focus was very much on the team. We doubled down on team working, on working in teams and on meetings with the team, and quite often at the expense of talking to other people. In the office, it's a lot easier to have discussions spontaneously with people outside of your team. When we're at home, it was so easy to really focus on our immediate tasks and our immediate working, and sort of lose a little bit of focus on outside of that. So I just wonder whether, there's broadly, that's something that many of us have seen. And yeah, it's even now with hybrid working, this is still an issue, because potentially if we are organizing time back in the office, this is potentially still done with the team, with our colleagues, and not necessarily with people outside of our teams. And the value of being in a diverse workplace is talking to diverse people and having these interactions with people that we don't normally see. And this is important. It's not just around the connection and making new friends, which actually is really important. I remember there was this statistic from the last 2 years around what is the biggest perceived reason for stress and poor mental well-being, and a lack of connection with colleagues was the highest one. Not being well connected with colleagues just for the social aspect really put a huge stress burden on us. It's not just around getting the ideas and the input, but it's just having somebody to talk to, just somebody we can just say, I'm struggling, this is crap, how would you do this? Obviously, on the productivity side of things, having other voices in our working is so key. We can have the same people looking at the same things, and we typically get the same outcomes. Bringing different people into these conversations changes it. We get their perspectives. So it was nice that these were acknowledged in these workshops. Then we looked at, right, what's going to stop us getting here? What are the barriers that will get in the way? And here are some of the selected barriers that came out of the workshops. And the themes here were really, we're too busy, we don't have time. And this is super normal. I think this is how most people feel. It's like, why should we try something new? We just don't have the time. A perception that there are too many tools to appreciate how they can help. With Microsoft 365, there are a lot of tools, and when we look at them all and we look at what they can do, there's a lot of overlap, and it's very hard, particularly for people that maybe are more used to working in email, to really appreciate what they can do for you. And I can struggle too. I'm across the tools, but sometimes I go, well, where does this fit? Why would I use this one? And lastly, a lack of opportunity to reflect. We've seen a lot of focus on delivery, but actually what a lot of the participants were saying is like, there's too much delivery. We're focusing too much on doing stuff and not enough on coming up for air and going, is this actually right? Should we be doing this at all? And this was a big issue. So it's really trying to acknowledge that these things need to be, we need to talk about these, and we actually need to overcome these. And one of the things with the lack of time is actually working better in the tools can save us time. And I showed you some of the ROIs at the beginning. Actually, if we're using Teams better, it can save us time versus using email. So there is an ROI there, but it's hard to see it when we are just continuing delivery. So we ran some stakeholder and pilot workshops. Again, these are all done virtually using Mural and Teams for the call. And from the strategy cards, there are around 51, and it's impossible to pretty much give everyone 51 cards and say, here you go, choose what you want to do. This was done through breakouts, so I might randomly deal out 10, 15, 20 cards to each breakout group and say, pick some. And some of the cards wouldn't be right. Some of the cards could be discarded, and that's great. We want to discard the ones we don't need. And these are, out of all of the workshops, 3 of the ones that would be regularly chosen. First one is around, how do we participate in digital conversations? And I think that's a key, particularly for leaders. How do you actually work? If we're using channels, what are the things we need to do? And as a lot of it is around listening, responding, liking. It's not just around broadcasting and putting out content and saying, this is what we need to be doing. Here are our KPIs, here are our priorities, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's about listening. It's about passively responding to activity rather than just leading the conversations. We want digital teams to actually be able to post content, to actually surface their issues, their activities organically, and good digital leadership enables that. It's if you find that one or two people are dominating conversations, yeah, it's typically the leaders, and these messages, those things they're posting in Teams don't typically get responded to. The second one that was selected quite frequently was around followership. How do we actually follow people outside of our team when we are in tools, when we're working digitally? Yeah, how do we find people that influence us and can help us through our work? It became apparent that we lose the ability to engage and network with new people when we are, you know, focused so much on delivery. So this became an issue that we needed to focus on. You know, how are we actually going to create some solutions to introduce people to new people? And on a separate project, one that I'm doing at the moment for a different organization, we've been doing all sorts of things using bots around trying to get people to have random coffees with new people in Yammer. You know, sort of, it's like setting up dates for people you've never met before. It's like a sort of, yeah, a matchmaker bot, which has been quite fun. And lastly, trying to actually formally agree with people how we work. I mentioned that Microsoft 365 has so many different tools. It's very hard to actually have common ways of collaborating. And really, sometimes it's just as simple as sitting down and thinking, who do we work with? How do we actually do this? And operating charters can be very simple. It could be just, you know, how do we interact with other teams? Do we use Microsoft Teams? Depending on what we do, maybe we need to use Planner, which is now known as Tasks. You know, perhaps it could be something else. It could be, you know, if you're not Microsoft House, it can be just, you know, Slack. It's just formally agreeing that, so we know this is how we do it, rather than, you know, sometimes we email, sometimes we use Teams channels, sometimes it's phone. It can be very complicated, and creating expectations simplifies things. And yeah, these don't have to be too onerous. And you can see that it mentions the book reference in that card, and that's where if there is a little bit more depth needed, we use the book as well. So if people wanted actually some help, you know, there's a page in the book that tells you how that happens. So this is, I'm just looking at seeing there's a couple of questions popping up. Did you want to read out? Did you want to run any questions now? Seth,
yeah, there's a couple of interesting ones come in, which give you a bit of a breather from your slides. This most recent one from Martin is interesting, because I've heard this one come up before, and I've talked about this one. So be interested in your perspective. So what's the equivalent of the water cooler types and going for the coffee conversations, you know, in the virtual kind of, you know, digital environment that leaders can have and facilitate with people? What's your take and experience of that?
Well, so the interesting, there was a HBR blog that spoke around make time for small talk in your meetings, that actually if you're running a Teams meeting, as much as it seems counterproductive, if you allow time at the beginning and the end of these meetings just for people to chat around whatever, you know, just have that kind of small talk around your pets, your issues working from home, the movies you've watched, the TV you're watching, that bonding activity is so important for just creating a sense of belonging in the team. And I think we overlook that. I think a lot of people say, you know, we need to have the agenda, we need to rattle through things quickly. Actually, sometimes it's just as important to have these informal conversations, because we're not having those water cooler chats. So that's something that I think is really, really important. The creating connection, and how do we balance that? So maybe some meetings don't have to be meetings. Some meetings, if we are just rattling through some questions, what are you doing? How are you getting on with this? They don't have to be live meetings. And maybe we can save time for these sort of more informal chats. Maybe even it's like some teams decide just to have coffee meetings. They might set up like a regular 9:30, 10 o'clock, 20-minute chat where it is just literally having a coffee and just connecting as a team. And this is so important. Oh, thanks. That's exactly the blog I was talking about. It's actually really worth reading. It's in the chat. There's a link there to that HBR blog. I mean, this is just within the team. It's how do we then move that out of our team and this is where Yammer comes in quite handy, you know, trying to actually connect with new people in Yammer. And years and years ago, when Yammer first came along, it was generally just pictures of cats. You know, that was its place, and you know, leaders hated it, HR hated it. And in the pandemic, actually these working from home with pets communities became really popular and actually really helped people connect with one another. And actually it did have a business purpose, because it gets people into Yammer, it gets people used to actually sharing things in a broader group. So then if you are starting to connect up to set up communities, it's a little bit easier. People are now familiar and more comfortable talking, and Yammer becomes a little bit more open and honest, because you've started to sort of surface your personal things. It becomes more of it becomes easier for people to work out loud in there, which, you know, I mentioned before, there is a fear of working out loud. You know, we're posting in these spaces, we don't know who's seeing it. So once you've got a few pictures of random looking pets, it becomes a little bit more safe.
Well, that's great. Just to kind of build on what you were saying,
I had a question on that as well, Saf.
Go on
in. So Andrew, I have had a little bit of experience with Yammer. However, most of the teams that I'd been working with had some team members who are FTEs and other team members who are guests. In there, and then they have no access to Yammer. So then half the team can access and see the stuff on Yammer, and the rest can't.
Right. So those guests wouldn't have an account with that organization, and they're coming in through their own email.
Yeah, which is the normal for any sort of consulting, coaching, or even butts on seats, right? You've got a team that you're bolstering with external resources, and then they feel very left out because they're not able to engage in the same conversations.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a good point. I mean, I work with other organizations, but quite often I have an email account. I have access to their tools, so that really helps. So I guess it depends on how contractors are treated. But yeah, I mean, on the flip side of it, having guest access into teams is phenomenally powerful. You know, being able to at least go in as a guest without needing to set up a company account and to have access. And this is actually going to get better. I mean, the problem at the moment with teams is that you have to set access at the team level. So if you have a team and you want to have a channel where you interact with people outside of your team, unfortunately, everybody that's in that external channel still needs to be the member of the team. So you're going to get external people having access to all the content and all the conversations of the team. But that's changing with, I think it's called Teams Connect, where you can create a channel. And that
they changed the name, but yes, it's I can't remember what they're calling it now, but yeah, I know the thing. We can talk offline. It actually has particular reasons why it doesn't work for lots of organizations, but yeah, it's a good. I definitely have engaged a lot with people in teams in organizations, and that is something that is totally viable.
Oh,
it's just
brilliant.
The Yammer part that doesn't work.
Yes, no, it is. And you know, there's a lot of, particularly IT, are like, we don't like having guests in teams, but at the end of the day, it's like it's not a problem. You know, it's really like you've got to ask why. You know,
so the whole guest thing was fundamentally designed by Microsoft to solve the problem of having to give external people access to your network and systems by giving them an actual internal domain account, which is a security risk, whereas guest accounts are not. I think it's a great feature.
Oh, it is absolutely. And this goes back to, you know, I mentioned that one of the issues that this workshop surfaced was the lack of connection with customers and stakeholders, and bringing them into teams is a great way of involving them, you know. And sometimes it's difficult to surface ourselves and think about how do we do that, but everything we do, we have upstream and downstream stakeholders, teams that we work with, that we rely on, or we deliver stuff to. And just thinking, how can we bring those people into our conversations? It doesn't have to be everything, but there's going to be conversations we have that will impact them, and bringing these people into teams is really powerful.
Yep.
All right, thanks. So the next stage of the workshops was around, what are the practices? What are the things that individually we want to do that will help us? So same approach. We had 64 everyday practice cards broken down into breakouts, and just asking the breakout groups from the random selections they were given. There might have been 10, 20, I don't know. I can't remember now. Yeah, pick 2 or 3 you'd like to try. And this is probably the most popular one that was chosen during these workshops. And these are pilot teams. These are people that are actually a team doing a particular function within the organization. Just setting out the things we like to do, how we like to work. It can be called a team user manual, but it can also be done in other ways. This can be done, we can do this just as a message in a Teams channel, but just talking about how we like to work, how we like to be contacted, things we love, our secret skills, bringing our whole selves into discussions, and then formally putting that into a user manual. So this is our team, this is who we are, this is how we like to work, this is how we like to be contacted. Starting to give ourselves a little bit of control around how we work, starting to bring ourselves into this, because if nothing happens, if no one actually creates these expectations around how we work and how we like to work, then we carry on in the ways we've always worked. So we carry on, just using email. We might just carry on just running with meetings upon meetings upon meetings. And yeah, we start to think about, oh, well, maybe we don't need these. And, how do I like to be contacted? What's the best way for me to receive feedback? And starting to articulate how we like to work and bringing these in as a sort of a team tool. And this feeds into another thing. So an organization I'm working with at the moment, we're coming up with what's called a team pact. It's an agreed way of working for hybrid work. And this is based on these sort of things. How do we like to work? How do we like to interact? What sort of things should we do asynchronously? What sort of things should we do as a live meeting? And it's just really figuring out how we prioritize and making these choices. If we don't, then hybrid's going to be messy. The next card, a really, really simple one. I think that I take this for granted myself as well. Not everybody is that digitally literate around using things like Teams channel and Yammer. We assume, we just go in there and we just start doing stuff. But actually using something simple like an at mention in a Teams channel is really powerful. We use these and we get replies, we get responses. We use these like we would an email. We want to send a colleague a message. We write that in a Teams channel, as long as it's nothing that's particularly sensitive or confidential. Put it in a channel, use an at mention, and we'll get responses. We can easily at mention the whole team if we want the whole team to respond, or we at mention individuals. And this is the equivalent of an email. And I think a lot of us don't really know this, or we need to be reminded that this is a thing we should all be doing, because if we want to be getting out of the email habit, we need to get people into channels. And just writing in a channel isn't necessarily enough. It's actually bringing in our colleagues into a message. And I think this acknowledges that. Yes, Saf, you wanted to make a point on that.
Yeah, just while you're talking, I think it's maybe a useful point to interject. So this is great, and I can understand why you're talking about it. What I think we've also seen, though, is how distracting that can also become.
Yeah.
I worked in an environment, in a previous place, not where I am now, where we were huge users of Slack. And there were multiple channels across the different projects, and you were basically constantly distracted by people pinging you directly or in chats and basically tagging you in, so to speak. We still see a bit of that now because we use Teams in my organization. What's your kind of view on how to strike a balance here? Because I think it is causing a lot of people problems, and the context switching, I think, is driving most of us mad. You know, jumping around and trying to deal. You know, I think people find it hard to create their own rules around, you know, when they're going to engage or not, and, you know, whether it's urgent or not. I think it's introducing new problems in some ways.
You know, you're right. And so this is where it's important to actually agree and define what do we use as our means of communication and collaboration. And I personally don't like Teams chat. I find chat is the most distracting format because chat's very immediate. You get a chat message, ping, it's in front of you, and like you feel like you need to give that your immediate attention. And I don't know what the time it takes to go into a chat message and then back to what you were doing, but I'm sure, you know, each chat message that distracts you adds many, many minutes per day. And really what I try to do is help nudge people into channels out of chat. So get out of email, get out of chat, and use channels as much as you can for everything. So you're focusing the discussions in one place. So you try and reduce the amount of notifications in chat, and agree, you're going to get notifications then in channels. But if this is the only place for internal conversations, you're not getting email notifications, you're not getting chat notifications. So it does narrow it down, it does simplify it. And I find that with channel notifications, generally people feel there's less sense of urgency around those. It's more easy to go in and respond to those at a convenient time versus chat notifications. So I find that really just agreeing this is where we're going to interact and this is the only place, unless, you know, it is urgent. And then what do we do when it's urgent? Is it chat? Is it pick up the phone? You know, it's just creating an agreed way of communicating and collaborating. So we do cut out the sort of unnecessary channels. I mean, Saf, what do you find? Is it chat itself that's distracting? Do you find that just Teams notifications are distracting?
Both, yeah, the notifications definitely, because you know you're maybe in the middle of an email, and then you know you get notifications popping up, and I think as human beings we naturally have a tendency to get momentarily distracted.
Yep.
And then we're coming back to what we were doing, and I think, I mean, I use the term costly loosely, but it can be a little bit costly when you're pinging back and forth. Or yeah, I think, you know, you could obviously mute them, you could introduce your own habits around when you're going to look at them, but when they're pinging up constantly, I think it can be distracting, and people are drawn towards them.
No, you can, and there's a lot we can actually do. So My Analytics can be quite helpful. So what if you in Microsoft, there's this thing called My Analytics, and that's not only shows you where you're spending your time, but also it's good at recommending when you can book out focus time. So you can go in there and you can basically tell it, book me in some focus time every day, and it will go through your calendar, look to when you don't have meetings and stuff on, and typically it also looks to when you are most likely to be doing your productive work, when you actually are just doing stuff, and it will block that out of your calendar. And that will then mean that you're as far as your colleagues can see, you're busy and you can block notifications during that time. So and I think the other thing now is it's becoming okay to do that. I think historically it's been like a bit of a, you feel a bit awkward saying I'm not open to talking to my colleagues, and your boss is like, hey, why aren't you responding? I'm trying to get in touch with you. Now it's actually okay to say, you know what, there's going to be 2 hours a day where I'm not going to respond to anything unless it's like super urgent. If it is, call me on my phone. And again, this is why setting up these agreed ways of work is so important. So we can say, yeah, for everybody, try and book out 2 hours of focus time a day. Try and just use channels for interacting with your colleagues. If it's urgent, pick up the phone. Make these expectations super clear, and then it's a lot easier to go forward. And then it's, you know, you can say, right, well, yeah, we might have our daily stand up asynchronously, you know, in the morning, you know, from like whenever to midday. So when you get in and you start, you can go in and you can put in your activities. You can read the responses when you need to, and then you can put your focus time in and get on and do the work you want to do. There might be live meetings at other times, and then there might be time where you might block it in, like this is when I'm going to go into my Teams channels and respond to my messages. And as a team, knowing that's how we work, then it's okay. You know, if that's agreed, then it's fine. You know, it's okay. It makes it okay to go and, you know, get out and have a walk. You know, your focus time could actually be away from the computer. It could be just like, I just need some time just to think about this and just to get away. It doesn't have to be lunchtime. I think that's the other thing, is we get kind of forced to like just get away from the screen at lunchtime, and actually, you know, focus time can be time away from the screen.
No, it's good. Good show. I think on the last point, without taking up too much more time, that became a better habit and something that we were all more conscious of and acknowledging everybody's need to do when we were all in lockdown.
Yep.
We were all at home, and I think, you know, we built that in and encourage each other to just say, look, I'm just stepping away, I'm going for a walk, and I'll be back in 20 minutes. And
yep.
it just wasn't something that, you know, we did as much when we were all co-located in offices, because we're all physically in a meeting space usually, or at a desk trying to get through things. So I think I'd say through the pandemic, we're thinking a little bit harder about the ways that we work.
Yeah,
trying to build better habits. And, you know, I talked about this in other forums where the team charter thing came to the fore, whereas before it wasn't something that we were doing as much of. Probably ought to have been. So it's been some positive consequences.
Absolutely. No, it's all about changing expectations. And I think, you know, I mean, I talk to people, and, you know, there's still an issue with managers who are like, still get really, really shitty that my team, I don't know where they are, and they've stepped out. I know that they've gone to pick up the kids, and I you know, and I can't get in touch with them, and I need to say to them, well, then you just need to talk to people and make sure that everyone is visible and clear about how they work. And it's a trust thing. It really comes down to a trust thing. You don't trust your team, they don't trust you, so they're not going to tell you that they're going to pick up the kids because they don't feel safe telling you that, so they'll rather sneak out. That means that you don't know where they are and you don't trust them. It's really just about putting it all in the open and just saying, you know, this is how I'm going to work today. Today I need to pop out at like 3 o'clock to pick the kids up. I'll carry on, you know, I'll stick around till 6 today, so if you need to catch me, these are the times to do it. For the team leader, then that's great. I can see where people are, I know what they're up to. For the person who's nipping out, suddenly it's okay. Like, you know, you're not feeling that kind of like, you're feeling like you're being naughty by not being at your computer for 20 minutes or half an hour. And, you know, like you say, like these things have shifted, but not for everybody. And this is the thing. There's still a lot of team leaders that don't really trust these sort of the focus time, and it's really giving an opportunity, like the cards give their teams the opportunity to say, this is important for me, and actually putting that out in the open. If we don't, you know, if we don't have these discussions, things won't change. So I'll just bring up the last card from from the ones that were chosen. This is probably one of the third most popular ones that came out of the workshops. It was around meetings and getting a team member to facilitate meetings rather than the team leader to run the meeting, to ensure different voices get heard. And again, we've probably heard this a lot during the pandemic around making meetings better, you know, just running a meeting, having somebody just talking through the whole meeting. There's no point being in that meeting. We're not actually interacting. Having somebody that's not the leader, that's maybe facilitating the meeting, to pull different people into the meeting, to pull different voices in, to maybe even curate different topics. That's what I think a lot of teams want to do, so that meetings become just a bit more refreshing, and to give other people a chance to be heard. Because quite often, if it's the team leader running things, they'll just rattle through their agenda. They'll maybe run a meeting based on what they want. It's not necessarily what their team wants. And it might just be them just monologuing about what they're doing, which is not, that doesn't need to be a meeting. That could be, they could even just record that as a video and send it out, and then people can watch that in their own time. So a broad spectrum of different things here, but this sort of reflects some of the issues that I think the participants were facing, and some of the things they wanted to try to sort of find new ways of work. So from this helps formulate some action areas. What are the things then that we can develop coaching in and measure, start coming up with some KPIs? And I won't go into the specifics of this because this is more sort of the deliverables that I can't really share. But what this looks like sort of broadly, it's establishing articulated ways of work within and between teams. So team charters, team user manuals, just narrating your day, telling people about how you're going to be working when you're on, and also crucially when you're off. So we create clear expectations. So important. And these are things that we can actually do. And this is where I think it's the important thing is we talk about actions. What can we do today? What are the things that we can individually do right now to start working in ways of work that support hybrid working? And things like narrating your day, so powerful because it's telling people what we're doing. If we're doing these in Teams channels, then there's visibility. And that's where I think the disconnect happens, is when there's not visibility and we're not connecting quite as much. We run the risk of losing people, that people disappear completely from our day-to-day working. They might not go into the office, they might just stay home, which is fine. But if we don't have that connection with them, there's a productivity issue, but also there's a mental well-being issue too. The second one was really around using channels, just creating very strong techniques around how we move from internal email into Teams channels, but also the basics, how to set up and use a channel. Things like how many people should there be in a channel? What do we set channels up for? So we're creating some guidance around, create a channel for every bit of deliverables that you do as a team. What are the tasks you deliver? What are the things you do as a team? Or if you're a project, what are the phases of the project? Create these as a channel and then have all the conversations you would in a meeting in these channels. The next one was around peer learning and influencing, running a program of actually how do we create peer learning communities? How do we actually get people surfacing problems and try to share the new techniques across the organization? So this is where we find and leverage people that are already doing things, get them to start posting in Yammer, get them to start posting in Teams. Simple things like creating problems and ideas channels. So we start to have a safe place to surface problems. What we really need to see are the sort of the tacit issues coming out, where we talk about, what sucks? What have we tried that works? And this can happen organically, but really we do need to find people, generally people that are reasonably senior or people that have a reasonable amount of influence, and just saying, we'd like you to talk about something that doesn't work or something you'd like help with, and start to make this okay, and start to use Yammer as a forum where people can start to be honest, because then we can start to make connections with new people. And creating a community in Yammer around what sucks is actually quite powerful, because you're starting to create a safe space. We talk about things that don't work, and too often we celebrate success, we celebrate delivery, and we don't celebrate the things that don't work. And it's making that okay, that failure is a good thing. Good posting practice in Teams, really just learning the basics of Teams. We take it for granted that people can use it, but the reality is the simple things like app mentions aren't that necessarily that obvious to many people. So really just showing people how to do it, how to get started. Focusing on bringing in voices from outside the team. So how do we bring in stakeholders, customers, and outside thinking? And we mentioned guest access into Teams, but also it's just making people aware of this, like, asking the question, are we actually talking to people upstream, downstream from us? How are we going to do this? Creating these team charters around formal ways of interacting with other teams, because if we don't, quite often then we just don't, we forget about them. And one activity that we adopted was using touch points, collaboration touch points. So this is a separate activity. If you want to know better ways of collaborating with other teams, just look at who do you interact with, how do you interact with, what are your touch points with these people? So it might be, it might be as informal as, well, I would typically walk past them when I was in the office and we'd have a quick chat over a sandwich, over a coffee. That's a collaboration touch point. So how do we then formalize this? How do we actually turn this into something that we can regularly do if we're not going to be having these informal moments in the office? And lastly, it's around making meetings more inclusive. So coaching around facilitating meetings. How do we move to asynchronous formats? So we started to have some very clear plans around running meetings in different ways, because this was coming up. Meetings weren't inclusive, meetings weren't relevant, meetings weren't engaging. And around half the meetings we discovered could be run asynchronously. So it's coaching around how to actually turn a live meeting into a conversation in Teams. And also, how do we do that so it's not necessarily live? You know, we can do that. It runs potentially over a morning, a day, a week. It could be longer. And once we start to get in the habit of being in channels and narrating our work and, you know, talking about, this is what I'm doing today, these are who I'm talking to, this is when I'm not around, suddenly you don't need so many meetings, because we're surfacing a lot of the topics and issues we'd raise in a meeting. They're already happening in the channels. And this is what we're starting to see in these pilot teams. So really, this was all bundled up. This was effectively the pilot teams were adopting this because the cards they chose, that was their plan. They were like, well, we're going to start doing this now. The rest of this was then formed into coaching for middle managers. And then this was rolled out by the client as more workshops using the resources. So they took all of these things. Each of these had content, had cards, and they went in and ran off and delivered these workshops. I ran some training programs around these topics in broad terms. And then I stepped away and left them to it. I gave them all the materials and really, you know, the question then that gets asked, well, where do we start? You know, if we're going to do this ourselves, what's the best starting point? Because, you know, there's a lot there to think about. It's always like start small. What one email could be a channel or Yammer message. You know, these are the things that if we want to start making a difference, think about one thing that one person can do every day. And I think this was the key that came out of it. It's like, let's look at one email at a time, one message at a time. And that's where the change starts. And so that's where the value of doing these pilot workshops is, because when we look at this, we look at like, what are the issues? And they start to understand, I am stuck in email. I am not connecting with my colleagues. I see the value of channel messages, and you know, the change at that level is really powerful. So yeah, we started really to appreciate the value of these changes, but also we weren't looking at ROI. We were looking at what's in it for me. You know, that we were realizing the problem is I'm not connecting with my colleagues. I am always on. I am relentlessly delivering stuff, and it's not helping. You know, I'm struggling. So from that starting point, the value of a channel message suddenly becomes a lot more powerful. And that was the program. And you know, I think the great value of the cards is that every program, every team, every workshop is different. Everyone is coming up with different things they want to try, and it's the what's in it for me. I think that's the powerful thing. So that's the story of that workshop. I mean, it's that program. I'd love you to share some questions or any of your experiences. What have you found has been the single most effective change that you've done with Microsoft 365? And you know, what's any other questions around techniques, around teams?
That's great, Andrew. Thank you.
No worries.
Good to hear. Yeah, some of the detail around the work you've been doing and the impact it's made and the sort of return on that investment. So I think that's really good. We do use Teams a lot in my org. We have a lot of Microsoft technology. But yeah, I think teams get different levels of value out of it. But I think, like most technology, a lot of it's about how you go around adopting it and socializing it and you know, creating, I don't want to use the word rules, but, you know, a set of sort of guardrails and guidance around what's deemed to be good practice and what you're going to kind of agree. So no, good to hear that. Yeah, lots of people.
Could I add some? I thought of something interesting that I think that I know that Andrew's been talking about Teams, but it doesn't necessarily need to be Teams that's the platform that we're talking about here. That's just the example, the scenario, the case study that he's presenting. And something I found that it was impossible for me to use Teams for my work stuff because there's only me in the company, and everybody else would be a guest, and then they all have to switch tenant in order to access it. Sath was one of those who's part of that. My experiment, I ran it for nearly 2 years and it just didn't work. I didn't get a lot of engagement in the teams, didn't get a lot of people coming back because they're off doing their own thing. So I actually moved to another platform called Mighty Networks, which is effectively the same thing but generic, right? It's a generic platform, and that allowed more people to collaborate, people to just jump in whenever they needed, without the faff of the crazy off type stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like, really, at the end of the day, the tools don't matter. It's really coming up with what is it we need to do, what's the best way of doing it. And an example, like let's say it is a Microsoft 365 organization, but it might not be Teams. It could be OneNote. It might be something as simple as we're just going to use with another team. We're going to share a OneNote and we're going to interact in that. And that's what works for us. And that's great. You know, I'm super happy to see things like that because, yeah, we assume that we have to be always collaborating synchronously, you know, using messages, but reality is it doesn't have to be that.
So Andrew, is perhaps one of the big dangers here is organizational enterprise standardization?
Yeah. Yep, it is. I mean, this is the, so my big bugbear is that the people I typically deal with, it comes from technology. You know, the way in through doing any of this sort of change is through technology, and actually they're the wrong people to be doing it because, yeah, the technology is there. It's really how do we own it, and that's a people issue, that's a culture issue. And I find that the people and culture sides of organizations aren't responsible, and they don't really feel like they want to own it because IT is so protective over it in many instances. And this is hard because, you know, we tend to, it's hard for me to find a way in because, like, the technology people want to train people just to use the tools, and the reality is that's not really going to work because we can push out lots of training, but we don't know what's relevant. We don't know what people are actually trying to do. You know, it's the people element that's important. And how do we get HR more involved in the adoption of technology? I think that's the challenge I'm facing.
Yep, they need to be involved for sure.
They do, and often they're not. They're really not. You know, it's.
I'm reaching for my unmute. Yeah, no, great. Nothing else in the chat at the moment. The group's small now. It's past 10 in the UK. So some of our UK community and audience tonight have obviously dropped off.
Yeah, no, I appreciate
it to eat, and that's cool. So if you've got, yeah, no, I was just going to say for anybody still here, if you got any other things you want to chat to Andrew around while we've got him and pick his brains, you know, I'd encourage you to do it. You're welcome to unmute, you know, stick your hand up. It's a small group, you know, it's pretty informal. It's, you know, a lot of us know each other, so just wade in and pick his brains while we've still got him for 15 minutes.
I've got heaps of time. I've still got like an hour and 15 minutes before I need to take the kids to school, so it's still early. Probably still
that's great. And I appreciate you saying that, but I'm not going to keep you longer than the time of the scheduled event, and we will stick to our time.
Yeah,
I'll be summoned by my family in 15-20 minutes anyway, so all good. But no, if you've got anything else for Andrew, guys, just yeah, just unmute and ask away. You're welcome to do so. If there's anything else, or if there's anything else, Martin, you do have a lot of experience in this arena as well. I know you've shared a little bit, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to add over and above anything you've already contributed this evening.
I don't know. I think the hardest thing is the hardest thing I found is not teams communicating, it's leadership communicating, and leadership continuing to be part of the story when we, because there's a lot of talk about hybrid, but this stuff's just not going away, and the majority of the time that I've seen teams who, even if half of them go back to the office, what about the other half, right? You're still going to be in an online event, even if half of you are physically in the same office. And yeah, I think it's just remote is going to be the future, with perhaps a little bit of time in the office. And figuring out how we solve these problems is actually quite important, which is why I was really interested in Andrew's talk, because
it becomes more now that people go to the office just because they want to go to the office. It's like, I just want to go in just to see my friends, to see people I know. If I'm going to do work, I'll probably stay at home and do that.
But then the chance of everybody on the team being in the office at the same time is actually really difficult.
Yep, it is. I mean, so that's when, agreeing how we work as a team. Like, is there a particular purpose where we all come into the office? What's the sort of activity that we should do that's in the office? So when you're doing like things like a team pact, it's really agreeing, is there something that we all should be in the office for? Like, is it a new starter coming on board? Should we all be in the office that day, so that we can get to know them? That sort of thing, agreeing that. So that's like a, not mandatory, but like, strongly encouraged that we're in the office that day. Other times, it's voluntary when you want to be in.
Well, I've been reading, listening to, because I'm Scottish and I can't read, so I have to listen to an audiobook. But I've been listening to A Year Without Pants, which is a book from a manager who started working at Automatic, and Automatic is WordPress, is maybe the more colloquial name for it, but they're a completely virtual asynchronous organization. They do not have offices. And they have budget every year for, do you want to get your team together? Pick a location in the world and get your team together, right?
Yep.
And have those catch ups so people get to see each other. But it seemed like the asynchronous meetings thing was the hardest thing to get used to and understand how actually the mechanics of it, right? How you successfully preside over that's the wrong word, but you know what I mean, facilitate a synchronous meeting that comes to some semblance of outcome over a longer period of time.
Again, it depends on what your meeting is for. I mean, if it's really trying to solve a problem, trying to tackle an issue, that really should be live. It's like, because you want people to have a conversation, you want that sort of that proper interaction. Where if it's a meeting where we are just sharing our updates, then it's very easy to be asynchronous, because there aren't really, if there is an issue, then you can see that, and then you can have a live meeting around that. That's when you can take that and actually have that discussion. Otherwise, it's more just for information. If people are just absorbing information, then it's simple. There aren't any actions. It's just awareness. And there's a lot of meetings that we run live that are for that. And we can waste a lot of time. Or a meeting where someone is presenting something, why that doesn't need to be live. That can be recorded and shared anytime.
I like what you were talking about, Martin, all except the title of that book, because I was one of these people who just wouldn't sign up to the, I've got a shirt or I'm looking smart, but you can't see what's going on, off screen. I just don't sign up to that. I'd get up every morning, normal time, shower, get dressed, have breakfast, and come into my home office and work as if I were physically going to leave the house. And I did that all the way through.
I learned that one really early in my career because I worked with a company in Livingston called Intelligent Finance. I won't tell you what the staff called the organization while we're on recording, right?
You bring them up at every opportunity.
Because it was the most horrendous place I've ever worked. I was the shortest employee at 3 weeks ever for the whole company. Wow. And yeah, so I had like 3 exit interviews. But anyway, they'd done a study. It was HBOS. They'd done a study about what should people be made to wear in the office every day, right? What's the most optimal performance we're going to get from people wearing? Should they wear a uniform? Should they wear a suit? What should they wear? And the answer to the study was whatever the heck you like, right? Is the correct answer, is a perfectly reasonable one. But it meant I was on a team where I was on slacks and a shirt, and the guy next to me is in a 3-piece suit, and the guy on the other side of me is in a hoodie and ripped jeans, right? And we're on the same team at the same level doing the same thing, but what do we feel comfortable? And it sounds like, Seth, you feel comfortable getting breakfast, getting dressed, having a shower, well, probably not in that order, going down, you go into your home office, whereas I'm quite happy to roll out of bed, put a hoodie on, and I'm still wearing my jammies.
Yeah. So there's a great example, excuse me, somebody I used to work with a while ago who works at Airbus, and he would, this is before the pandemic, just when people were largely in the office, and he would just randomly in meetings turn up dressed as the Mad Hatter, just because he could. And he just wanted to make people feel comfortable being themselves. And so if he went to the extreme, like dressing as the Mad Hatter, it then makes everyone else feel a bit more comfortable just wearing a hoodie or, you know, just wearing what they felt like. And, you know, these sort of things actually are very powerful statements.
I had somebody in a training class a couple of months ago who was wearing their like a pink dress. It was a guy, right? This pink fluffy dressing gown on. He's like, yeah, that's just what I was wearing today.
Tom's patiently waiting with his virtual hand up, which I like because he's exercising and demonstrating some brilliant virtual meeting etiquette. So I'm going to take charge of this now. Tom, floor's yours.
Okay, I didn't want to interrupt the flow, so thanks a lot, Andrew. I learned a lot, which is why I came. Now I bring up a comparison thing. I spent a lot of time studying Elon Musk and his company, number one, and Jeff Bezos and Amazon. And they have lots of ideas and practices here. It might be interesting to compare some of them or, you know, with your own methods. I'll pull out just 2 to give an example. And I put in the chat a little thing I've been collecting called Musk's Methods, free book, and you'll get some of the practices there. But in Musk's case, he enjoins his teams to try to improve their own process or practice every day and measure whether they get better. Now that's pretty dramatic. Every day, literally, it could be a 10-hour day. But he says, if you had an insight that you could improve something, and you do it today, now, I don't, you know, I almost don't care what it, even if it's wrong, do an experiment and see if it works. Okay, so that's one. It's not unlike what you're doing. It's a bit more extreme. Okay? Yes. And then the other thing, I'll just point something from Bezos, one out of many, many things. They have a lot of advice there. It's his practice of not having PowerPoint slides, which they adopted over 20 years ago, and presentations, but having 6-page presentations with a 1-page summary at the front, which everybody in the meeting reads for the first 20 minutes of the meeting and thereafter discusses. And that's a radically different way of having a meeting. And I think those practices are very interesting. And the 2 I mentioned could be adopted, you know, one-off together with your practices. So, so my remark is, I find Bezos and Musk to be extremely agile, number one, the best agilists in the world, I'd call them. And has some very interesting but extreme practices that seem to work for them if you want to earn, you want to be worth $300 million.
But also, like for Jeff Bezos, there was one, I think, very kind of sensible thing, which is the 2 pizza rule, which is like if you've got a team, you need to feed them with if you can feed them with 2 pizzas, that's a good size of team. You don't.
One of the many, many good ideas floating around there.
Yep.
So someday maybe someone will collect. So I've tried to collect Musk's practices in the little booklet I gave you, but somebody should collect. In a way, Walter Isaacson, who wrote the latest book about Bezos, has collected them, but it's in a 500-page book. You sort of need to pull each, let's say there are 50 practices, and we need to pull them into a little catalog of practices and how they work. And nobody's actually done that I can see. Maybe I'll do it one day, but
please do.
Remind me if you don't decide to do it yourself. Anybody got any really good Musk practices that are not in my Musk Methods book? Please tell me.
Did you put in there, everyone must be in the office, or is that did that come afterwards?
Sorry,
so you can have a whole argument about what he actually meant there, and if you bring in the context of the working environment and culture at Tesla, that's not quite what he was saying, because they have a very particular. I did see it blow up on the internet myself, right? But he didn't. It was an in joke for Tesla employees in order to encourage them, and it just didn't come over well for the rest of us. But he doesn't care. That's the other thing he does, right? Is he doesn't care what the rest of us think. He's like, this is who I'm speaking to. You overheard me. Whatever's right. That's.
Yeah, it got leaked, didn't it? Yeah. I'm just conscious.
Well, it was. He posted it on Twitter, Sath. So that's not really a leak.
Yeah, well, eventually, it was on Twitter. We've got 3 minutes left, so I'm gonna bring it to a close. Just I've got enough time to do a couple of formalities and shout outs. But just to close out, to Tom, what you're talking about, I'm looking forward to reading your share. Thank you for that. I'll share it around the community. But the thing I would definitely call out Elon Musk and what he's done at Tesla is the culture is created around meetings and meeting etiquette and whether one should go to the gazillions of meetings that are in our diaries. And I've actually adopted that. So I don't go to a lot of the meetings. My week's just full of meetings. And I don't go if I don't think I'm going to get any value out of it. I'm not going to add any value. I just don't turn up. Or if I want to just remember it's there, I accept a lot of meetings as tentative.
Right.
I won't go because I'd rather sit and do some, I don't want to say real work, but I do mean like real.
Now he's very, very clear about it. And another thing that just pops to mind, I've just put in the latest edition. He believes in direct communication between people and not going through any hierarchy or permissions at all. You know, the shortest route from when somebody has an idea to somebody needs to make it happen, whatever the hierarchy in the organization, this extreme direct communication. That's another one of the many interesting examples there. Anyway, it's in the book. Book's free.
No, great. No, we'll share it around. Thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks. No, I've just downloaded it.
I think we've got to the end now. We've got a couple of minutes, so yeah, a bit tight. But no, that was great. It is quite late here in the UK. Appreciate everybody showing up, and definitely our wonderful speaker today, for whom it is very early down in the southern hemisphere. So thank you, Andrew. It was great.
No worries.
Great shares, great insights.
Thank you. Well, the sun's up now, so I feel like it's now
do you
time to be
feel
up.
Do you feel a bit better now? Do you? No, we'll get the recording out. We usually get them out quite quickly. There'll be quite a lot of folks signed up who couldn't then make it in the end, but I'm sure they'll enjoy the recording. So thank you for everything. And yeah, we'll share some other bits around your ongoing work, etc. So, yeah. You've got anything?
We'll have the recording up by midnight. It'll be fine.
Usually get them out quickly. So yeah, just to say thanks to everyone who's still here and contributed to this amazing session and the conversation and helped share their insights. We do have a whole bunch of stuff still going on, as you all know. The diary's full right up until December. I did put it in the chat, but just to call it out, so if you can help, please do. Martin's got a visitor. We've got 2 events in July, but notably one of them is in person. We are going to live stream it, Tom, so you won't miss out if you want to hear from Bryce Hoffman himself. He is going to be in Scotland. We are hosting him in collaboration with some of the other meetup groups. It's an exciting event for us, and we're keen to drum up more interest. So if you can help us share that in your own communities, etc. Martin, you can obviously help with that, because we physically booked essentially a large lecture theatre at Napier University, where we have friends in contact. So just
I don't think anybody in my communities is in Scotland, Sath.
We've got communities everywhere, but you've got, yeah, take my point. And we're also working on an exciting new event with Erin Randall, which is not quite live yet, but that one will be in August. So we're going to have 2 in August as well. So yeah, just give you some exciting news there. And yeah, just thanks again for being here and contributing. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Very topical, and we will get the recording. I think others will enjoy it. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you all are. I think, yeah, we're widely spread around the globe this evening,
Right.
the remainder of the attendees. So thank you all, stay safe, and we'll see you again soon, folks.
No worries. Thanks, Seth. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.
Thanks, Andrew,
Bye.
again. Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you.